A very good afternoon, dear students. So once again I've come back to conduct this class, that is the class for class 9 ABC, and the subject that I'm going to do is obviously geography. So last class we had done the structure of the earth, the interior of the earth, and I've given you some lessons, and I suppose you have gone through the lesson as well as done the assignments that are there at the back of your chapter. Please do be serious, dear students, and do it sincerely. And if you have any doubts, you can refer your book. And still, if you are still unable to get the answers, when you come back, we'll try to solve it in the class. But make sure that you do the questions that are there at the end of the chapter, which is very important. So today, dear students, we will go with the next chapter, that is chapter 5, and that is the materials of the earth's crust. Materials of the earth's crust. That means we do this chapter, that is rocks. See? Before we start this chapter, please make sure you have your textbook opened. Make sure you have a small pencil, a notebook to note the important points as I go on teaching this lesson. So dear students, I am going to start this next chapter, that is the materials of the earth's crust, and our main focus today in this class is on rocks. So we study about the rocks. Now, the most significant part of the earth's crust is the lithosphere. See, the most significant part of the earth's crust is the lithosphere. Now, the literal meaning of lithosphere is the sphere of rocks. That means we're talking about the rocks. So it is called the sphere of the rocks. Now, rocks can be found in various areas, in various shapes and sizes. The term rock refers not only to any hard, solid matter like granite, but it's also very soft and loose particles like sand, silt and clay. That means rocks are not only very huge boulders or solid matters like granite, but they are also very small and loose particles like sand, silt and clay. So these are the ways in which rocks are found on the surface of the earth. Now if you go inside the earth's surface, so suppose you go 16 kilometers beneath the earth's surface as you go, 95% of the materials that are found in the earth's crust are rocks. If you go 16 kilometers beneath the earth's crust, more than 95% of the materials that are found are rocks. So I told you, rocks therefore is not only hard and solid matters like granite, but it's also soft and loose particles like sand, silt and clay. See? Rocks have minerals which are found mostly in their solid state. See, rocks have minerals which are found mostly in their solid state. Now rocks are naturally occurring inorganic substance which do not have any chemical composition. Please keep that in mind. Rocks are naturally occurring inorganic substance which do not have any chemical composition. They are heterogeneous. See, rocks are heterogeneous. Now, coming to the next part. Minerals. What are minerals? See, minerals, if you see, are naturally occurring inorganic substance which have a definite chemical composition and a physical property. Slightly different from the rocks. Minerals are found naturally. They are hard, solid, inorganic substance which have a definite chemical composition and of physical character. minerals are homogeneous. Okay, so we are doing minerals, so I told you minerals are naturally occurring hard, solid, inorganic substance which have a definite chemical composition and physical property. That's very important. Minerals are homogeneous in their composition. Homogeneous. Most of the minerals are compounds or mixture of elements. Most of the minerals are compounds or mixture of elements. The most common rock forming mineral is the silicates, a combination of oxygen and silicon. See, the most common rock forming mineral is the silicates, which is a combination of oxygen and silicon with a metallic or basic metals. Now, minerals can be metallic or non-metallic. Metallic minerals are, for instance, lead, copper, zinc, gold, etc. Iron, etc. And then we have non-metallic minerals, which are non-metallic, which are, for instance, we have gypsum, quartzite and mica. These are the non-metallic minerals. So please keep that in mind. Now we move slightly further and we see the rocks. What are the different types of rocks? So the first type of rock which we have is the igneous rocks. Igneous rocks. Then we have the second one, sedimentary. Sedimentary rocks. Then we have the third one, that is the metamorphic rock. Metamorphic rocks. So there are three types of rocks: the igneous rocks, the sedimentary rocks, and the metamorphic rock. The first one, what is an igneous rock? The word igneous means fire. So, what is an igneous rock? Igneous rocks are those rocks which have been formed when the molten magma or lava cools down. Please keep in mind. Igneous rocks are formed when the molten magma that is inside the Earth's surface or the molten lava that is on the surface of the Earth, when these cool down, it results to the formation of igneous rocks. That means when the volcanic eruption takes place. When a volcanic eruption takes place. See? When the magma is inside and when that cools, it's called as intrusive igneous rock. And when the lava flows on the surface of the earth and cools down, it is also called as an intrusive igneous rock. But then, igneous rocks can be divided into two types. There are two types. One is an extrusive igneous rocks, and the other one is an intrusive. See, igneous rocks are of two types. One is an extrusive igneous rock, extrusive, and the other one is an intrusive igneous rocks. Now, what is an extrusive igneous rocks? That means the rocks that are found on the surface of the earth, are called as the extrusive igneous rocks. When the volcanic eruption takes place, and the lava starts to flow on the surface of the earth, and after some time as the lava flows and cools down, it turns into a hard, solid rock. Such type of rocks are called as the extrusive igneous rocks. When the molten lava, which has been ejected from the volcanic eruption, as that lava starts to flow on the surface of the earth, and after some time it starts to cool down. When it cools down, it forms into a hard, solid rock, which is called as an extrusive igneous rocks. The example here you can see is basalt. Basalt is an example of an extrusive igneous rock. Now, what is an intrusive igneous rocks? Intrusive igneous rocks are those rocks which are formed inside the Earth's surface when the molten magma cools down. That means when the volcanic eruption is about to take place, or when the molten magma is inside the Earth's surface as it starts to come up. But because of the less pressure in the magma slowly goes into the cracks and crevices inside the Earth's surface. And they start to cool there, forming into rocks, which is called as an intrusive igneous rocks. Examples we have is granite. See, granite. Granite. See, igneous rocks are those rocks which are formed when the molten magma or lava cools down. Now, it can cool down inside the Earth's surface and cool down on the surface of the Earth. For instance, if the molten lava cools on the surface of the Earth, it is called as extrusive igneous rocks. The example here is basalt. Sometimes the molten magma cools inside the Earth's surface. And when that cools down, it forms into a hard solid rock, which is called as an intrusive igneous rocks. The example here is granite. See, I would just like to show you a small diagram here. Just see. See, this is the magma. See, this is the magma. And as the magma starts to come up, and after it comes up, what happens? Suppose it comes out. When it comes out, the lava will flow on the surface of the Earth. The lava flows on the surface of the Earth. And when the lava flows on the surface of the Earth, and when it cools down, it forms into a hard solid rock, which is called as an extrusive igneous rocks. But sometimes when the magma is coming up, and suppose it cools down here itself, it goes into some cracks and cools down. When it cools down inside the Earth's surface, it turns into a hard solid rock, which is called as an intrusive igneous rocks. So that is how the igneous rocks are formed. Igneous rocks are mainly formed because of the molten magma. When the molten magma explodes out in the form of volcanic eruptions, it results in the formation of an igneous rock. It can be formed on the surface of the Earth, which is called as an extrusive igneous rock, or it is formed inside the Earth's surface, which is called as an intrusive igneous rocks. You see, the examples I told you, basalt is the example of extrusive igneous rock, and intrusive rocks we have as an example is granite. So now let's look in detail about this igneous rock before we go to sedimentary rocks. Now, igneous rocks are of two types I told you, extrusive igneous rocks and intrusive igneous rocks. Now let's see a little bit about these two rocks. Extrusive igneous rocks I told you are formed when the molten magma cools on the surface of the Earth, when the molten lava, because when the magma comes up and starts to flow on the surface of the Earth, it is called as lava. So when the lava cools down, it forms into a hard solid rock called as an extrusive igneous rocks. And because the rate of cooling is very fast, as they flow on the surface of the Earth, they cool down fast. They cool down fast, because of which the rocks which are formed are also smaller in size. See? Small in size. It forms faster. Intrusive igneous rocks, the magma that is there inside the Earth's surface, when they cool down, it forms into intrusive igneous rocks. Example is a granite, I told you, because it takes a long time for the magma to cool down inside the Earth's surface. It takes a long time. Therefore, what happens? The rocks that are formed are also of bigger size. See? The crystals are bigger in size compared to the rocks that are formed on the surface of the Earth. So we have here the extrusive igneous rocks and the intrusive igneous rocks. Now let's go to the sedimentary rocks. Sedimentary rocks. Sedimentary rocks, what are sedimentary rocks now? Sedimentary rocks are those rocks which are formed from the sediments. See, the word itself will tell you. Sedimentary. That means those rocks which are formed from the sediments are called as the sedimentary rocks. Now, how are they formed? See, when the rocks are broken down, when the igneous rocks are broken down either because of rain, either because of wind, or either because of glaciers, what happens? The rocks starts to break down and form into small particles. These small particles are taken to a low-lying area, somewhere in the lower areas they are taken. See, they are taken down in the lower areas because of wind. And therefore, the particles starts to accumulate in a particular place for a long duration. And when the particles go on collecting in the same area for a long duration, the particles become more and more. And ultimately what happens? They form into what is called as a sedimentary rock. Because they are formed from the sediments. See? Sedimentary rocks are those rocks which are formed from the sediments. Because of the compression. Because of the pressure of the overlying particles of the rocks. See, when more and more particles start to collect in a particular area, the weight also increases, and in course of thousands and thousands of years, because of the compression from the upper particles, what happens? Because of the weight of the sediments that have been accumulating in that particular area for a long time, what happens? It turns into a hard solid rock called as a sedimentary rock. So, sedimentary rocks are those rocks which are formed from the sediments. When the sediments are compressed, they are formed into sedimentary rocks. Now, sedimentary rocks are also of different types. For instance, we have one sedimentary rock. We have a rock here. We have a sedimentary rock here. Sedimentary rocks are of three types. The first one which we have is the mechanically formed. Mechanically formed sedimentary rocks. Mechanically, they are also called as physically formed sedimentary rocks. Example we have is the sandstone. Then we also have another one here, which is organically formed sedimentary rocks. Organically formed sedimentary rocks. Example, if you see coal, limestone, see coal, limestone, and then we have the third type of sedimentary rock, which is called the chemically formed sedimentary rocks. Chemically formed sedimentary rocks. Example we have is marble and slate. See, igneous rock, I've told you what it is. Different types of igneous rocks are there. Extrusive igneous rocks and intrusive igneous rocks. Now we come to sedimentary rocks. What is a sedimentary rock? I told you. A sedimentary rock is a rock which has been formed when the sediments are compressed. Now how were the sediments? How were they formed? They were formed because of the erosion. When the igneous rocks, or whether the metamorphic rocks, or even the sedimentary rocks, see, when they are broken down because of the rain, because of the wind, because of the glaciers, when they are broken down, they form into small particles. And when these particles collect in a small place for a long duration of time, they become more and more. They collect and become more and more. And ultimately, because of the pressure from the upper parts, what happened? They are compressed and they form into a hard solid rock called as a sedimentary rock. Now the first one, mechanically formed sedimentary rocks. How are sedimentary rocks formed mechanically? How are they formed? Mechanically formed sedimentary rocks. Mechanically formed sedimentary rocks are those rocks which are formed because of the erosion, because of the breaking down of rocks by the river, by the water, or by the glaciers. When the rocks are broken down, they form into small particles, and when these particles are compressed in course of hundreds of years, they form into a rock which is called as a mechanically formed sedimentary rock. Example is a sandstone. Now the next type of rock is the organically formed sedimentary rocks. How are sedimentary rocks formed organically? Organically formed sedimentary rocks are derived by the accumulation of remains of organisms such as the skeleton of dead marine animals like corals, oysters, algae, which gets deposited and cemented in the shallow lakes and sea floors. That means organically formed sedimentary rocks are those rocks which have been formed from the dead organisms. When the skeleton of the dead organisms are compressed, when they are pressed, like the skeletons of corals, oysters, algae, when they are compressed in course of thousands of years, because of the compression, they are cemented together in the lakes, shallow lakes, or in the sea floor, whereby turning into organically formed sedimentary rocks, whereby forming into sedimentary rocks. But they are termed as organically formed sedimentary rocks because they are formed from the organisms, living organisms. Maybe an example is coal. Coal, see? Coal is also another example. Coal is a fossil fuel. They were formed from the plants and animals that were buried under the ground thousands of years ago. And because of the pressure, because of the heat, they were compressed and they lost all their characteristics except the carbon content that they had, whereby forming into a type of rock which is called as an organically formed sedimentary rocks. So coal is categorized by the amount of carbon content. See? Example of sedimentary rocks. They are formed from the dead remains of animals or plants. See? And then the third one we have is the chemically formed sedimentary rock. Chemically formed sedimentary rocks are those rocks which have been formed from the evaporate, when the water evaporates in the desert regions, especially in the desert region. When the water evaporates because of the high temperature, it leaves behind mineral salt. It leaves behind mineral salt. And when these mineral salts are left behind, they are compressed, and in the course of many years, they form into a hard solid rock, like the rock salt, whereby they are termed as the chemically formed sedimentary rock. See? Example here, marble and slate. Marble and slate. See? Example, chemically formed sedimentary rocks. So we see here, see, sedimentary rocks are formed mechanically, they are formed organically, and they are formed chemically also. You can just see here, sedimentary rocks. See, sedimentary rocks. Examples here, granite. They are used at your homes. They are used in your homes. When you use construction, for the construction, they use all these things. See, granite. These are the examples of sedimentary rocks. They have been formed in layers, and therefore the sedimentary rocks are also called as stratified layers. Stratified layers or layered rocks. Why? Because they are formed in layers. See? The particles, the broken down particles of the rocks go on accumulating in a particular area. Some more comes, some more comes. Therefore, they are formed in layers. Like the layer of the onions. See? Sedimentary rocks are formed in layers. See? Compression. See, you can see the layers also. See? They are formed in layers. Therefore, they are also called as stratified rocks or layered rocks. They are also called as secondary rocks. Secondary rocks. Okay. See? Now we move to the last one, that is the metamorphic rock. What is a metamorphic rock? The word metamorphism means change. See? The word metamorphism means change. And how does that happen? That means metamorphic rocks are a changed rock. When the igneous rocks and when the sedimentary rocks undergo extreme heat and pressure, when the igneous rocks and the sedimentary rocks undergo extreme pressure, so they change the entire characteristics. The entire characteristics change, the texture, the color, see? The characterization, everything changes, whereby they form into a new type of rock which is metamorphic rock. That is why I told you, metamorphic rocks are a new rock. Metamorphism means change. So, metamorphic rocks are those rocks which have been changed. They are new type of rocks. You can just turn a page, books in the front, at the back, see? Changed rocks. Metamorphism. See? You can see an example here of some metamorphism. See? Sorry. Metamorphic rock. Example, we have is marble. Example, we have is marble. Then we also have slate. 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 See? That is also an example there of metamorphic rocks. So please keep that in mind. See? Metamorphic rocks are those rocks which have been formed out of change. Because of change. And how will they change? When igneous rock and sedimentary rocks underwent huge pressure, underwent huge amount of heat, they changed their form, or a different type of rock was formed, which is called as a metamorphic rock. Example I told you is marble and slate. Metamorphic rock. You can just see here. See, see. Because of the heat from the interior of the earth, and the pressure from the overlying rocks, because of the pressure on top and the heat inside, what happens? The igneous and sedimentary rocks change, they form into a new type of rock, which is called as a metamorphic rock. So therefore, a metamorphic rock is a rock which is formed because of the change in the igneous and sedimentary rocks, because of the heat and pressure that's applied to these type of rocks. See? So what is a rock? I told you. A rock can be termed as it's not only a hard solid matter like granite, but it's also termed as a small, loose and minute particles like sand, silt and clay. See? Rocks are aggregates of minerals. Minerals also are very important. Then I told you different types of rocks. Igneous rocks, sedimentary rocks and metamorphic rock. What is an igneous rock? Igneous rock is a rock which has been formed when the molten magma or lava cools down, either inside the earth's surface or on the surface of the earth. Now, there are two types. One is an extrusive igneous rock and the other one is an intrusive igneous rock. When the molten lava cools on the surface of the earth, it is called as an extrusive igneous rock. Example is basalt. When the molten magma cools inside the earth's surface, it is called as an intrusive igneous rock. Example is granite. See, igneous rocks are also two types. We have the plutonic and the hypobasal rock. See, the plutonic rocks are bigger in size, very big in size. They are found right deep down. Whereas the hypobasal are slightly smaller. They are found in the midways, in between. Okay, so we continue with this and we just looked very fast how we just went through this class. Rocks, I told you how they formed. They are formed either, they are more than I told you, 95% of the Earth's crust, 60 kilometers below the Earth's surface, is comprised of rocks. Now I told you they are aggregates of minerals, and the rocks are of different types. Igneous rocks, which are formed when the molten magma or lava cools down, either inside the Earth's surface or on the surface of the Earth. They are extrusive, intrusive. Then we come to sedimentary rocks. I told you sedimentary rocks are those rocks which are being formed when the sediments are compressed. They are mechanically formed sedimentary rocks which are formed when the rocks are broken down, either because of the glaciers, either because of rivers, or either because of wind. See, when the igneous rocks are broken down, they are also called as secondary rocks. They are also called as stratified rocks or layered rocks because they are formed in layers. See, mechanically formed sedimentary rocks. Then they are also formed organically formed sedimentary rocks. That means they are formed from the dead remains of plants and animals. When the marine animals die, the skeleton is compressed. The corals, oysters, algae, when the skeletons are compressed, they form into sedimentary rocks. When the plants and animals die, they are buried under the ground, they form into fossil fuel. And in course of time, they are compressed and they are formed into coal. See, an example of sedimentary rock. chemically formed sedimentary rocks also. See? When the evaporation takes place in the deserts, it leaves behind a salt, which later on turns out to be a rock, which is called as a rock salt. Or a gypsum is also an example of the chemically formed sedimentary rocks. Then metamorphic rocks, I told you. Metamorphic rocks are those rocks which are being formed because of change. And how are they formed? When heat and pressure was applied to the igneous sedimentary rocks, a new type of rock was formed. A new type of rock was formed. Changed its entire color, texture, characteristics, everything was changed. They turned into a new type of rock which is called as a metamorphic rock. Because the word itself tells metamorphism means change. See, metamorphic rock, it has been changed on. Examples are marble and slate. See, then metamorphic rocks are formed in 3 ways. Thermal metamorphism, when the rocks are formed because of the high temperature, they are called as thermal metamorphism. When the rocks are formed because of the high pressure, they are called as dynamic metamorphism. And when the rocks are formed because of both temperature and pressure, they are called as regional metamorphism. Regional metamorphism. So that's how it is. So now we go slightly a little bit further and we come to the last part of this lesson. Okay, now we come to the last part, that is the rock cycle. Rock cycle. How are rocks formed? So we'll come very fast here. Magma, I told you rocks are formed when the molten magma cools down inside the Earth's surface, so on the surface of the Earth, igneous rocks are formed. So when the magma cools down, it results in the formation of what? Igneous rocks. Igneous rocks are formed. See, when the molten magma cools down, it results in the formation of igneous rocks. Cooling takes place, igneous rocks are formed. Now in this igneous rocks, when weathering takes place, erosion when weathering and erosion takes place, it forms into sediments. See? When the igneous rocks, when weathering takes place or erosion takes place, when the rocks are broken down, either because of wind, water, glaciers, see? When they are broken down, they form into sediments. Now when these sediments are compressed, they form into what is called as sedimentary rocks. See? When the sediments are compressed because of pressure, after thousands of years, they form into sedimentary rocks. See? And on this sedimentary rock, when heat and pressure is applied, when heat and pressure is applied, they form into metamorphic rocks. See? Metamorphic rocks. See here? And on this metamorphic rock, when only heat is applied, they form into, again, molten magma. So you can see us. These sedimentary rocks also sometimes when they undergo erosion, either because of the wind, water or glaciers, when erosion takes place, they form into sediments again. See? After they have been compressed, they form into sedimentary rocks, but these sedimentary rocks also, if they undergo erosion and weathering, they are broken down into small particles, whereby again they are formed into sediments. You can just see here. And then if you go a little bit more, see, in this igneous rock, when you apply heat and pressure, is applied. When heat and pressure is applied here to the igneous rocks, they form into metamorphic rock. So you can just see here, see? And these metamorphic rock, this metamorphic rock also, if they undergo erosion, see, weathering and erosion, see, if the metamorphic rocks are also broken down because of erosion, either by wind, water or glaciers, again they are turned into sediments. Again from there they are compressed, form sedimentary rock, see, heat, pressure, metamorphic rock and back to magma. So this is the rock cycle. So once again I am just going to do with you very briefly. See, when the molten magma cools down inside the Earth's surface or on the surface of the Earth, igneous rocks are formed. When these igneous rocks undergo weathering and erosion, they form into sediments. They are broken down into sediments. When these sediments are compressed after thousands of years, they form into sedimentary rock. They form into sedimentary rock. See? Now, when these sedimentary rocks are formed, if again weathering takes place, erosion takes place on the sedimentary rocks, again they will form into sediments. And then from the sedimentary rocks, when heat and pressure is applied, they form into metamorphic rock. When heat and pressure is applied on the sedimentary rocks, metamorphic rock is formed. Now this metamorphic rock also, if it undergoes erosion and weathering, again they will form into sedimentary rocks. Again they will form into sediments. Why? Because they will be broken down, they will be formed into sediments, and again they form it back into sedimentary rocks. From this metamorphic rock, if only heat is applied, then they again melt down and again turn back into magma, where they come back to again the start. The igneous rocks also sometimes when heat and pressure is applied to this when heat and pressure is applied to the igneous rocks, they form into the metamorphic rock. So this is the rock cycle. This is how the rocks are formed. Please look at the diagram in your textbook. You'll understand it a little bit more clearly. Okay? So that's how the rocks are formed. Now a little bit, we'll just go and see the importance of the rocks, economic importance of the rocks. See, what are the importance of the rocks? The rocks have minerals, number one. See, they are the storehouse of the minerals. Number two, see, they are used for construction. Number three, they have precious metals like gold, see, silver, precious metals. Rocks provide us basic raw materials for making cement and so on. The historical periods are named after the rocks as well. The historical periods are also named after the rocks. For instance, the Stone Age, see, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, and so on. All these are also named after the rocks. So rocks has a lot of importance. Every day we have been using these rocks for so many things. See, rocks comprise of different minerals, and these minerals are so very important to us, dear students. So I guess this is the end of the chapter, dear students. Please do study well, revise the chapter, read this chapter a couple of times, 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, and then go at the back. See, at the back we have some questions. And most importantly, the reasoning questions. Give reasons for. These are very important. You have to do this. All the chapters have reasoning questions. You have to go through those chapters. Very important. So, please make sure you do the questions at the back. And when we come back after the school starts, we'll just check to see how you have done. But please make sure you have done 95% of your assignment. Maybe 1 or 2 you may not be able to do. We understand that. But make sure you do as much as possible. So we expect that from you. Dear students, please study well, take care, and be safe as well. Thank you so much.